Avi Meyer's Sonny Hirsch Election Special. Thank you for joining us. This is segment 3. We want to let you know how important it is to get to know your candidates, and this year we are concentrating especially heavily on judicial candidates. There are not that many interesting races, unfortunately, in the general election, but there are many, many interesting races in the judiciary, and I can't begin to tell you, how large an impact a judge can have over your life compared to your state rep or your state senator. We're talking about your freedom. We're talking about your marriage. We're talking about custody of children. We're talking about your mortgage. We're talking about even life and death issues.
Right.
So it is so important that you pay attention. And 40% of people don't even bother to go to the judicial part of the ballot, despite the fact that so few of you vote in the first place. So vote first of all. And you know what? Why not do the judges first and then go from there? And we are happy to introduce you to somebody.
A good rule. A very good rule.
Thank you.
Great.
And we are talking to somebody who is presently an appellate court judge, somebody who is running for the Supreme Court, which is the highest honor in the state of Illinois you can possibly get judicially, and somebody who's very highly thought of by other judges, Judge Aurelia Pucinski. How are you?
I'm fine. Thank you for having me.
First of all, my
pleasure.
pleasure.
Happy to be here.
Thank you. And I want to thank your daughter, Rebecca, for bringing you.
Well, thank you.
Pleasure to meet her.
Glad to have her with me.
Okay. And how are you finding the campaign trail?
Campaigning, I love campaigning, largely because I get to meet really nice people all over Cook County, suburb, city. Every place I go, people are terrific. Even people who have never met me before are just really nice and welcoming, and they want to meet their candidates. So I say, go ahead, kick my tires, see what I'm about. Ask me questions, go for it.
That sounds good. Why don't you give us your background?
I am currently an appellate court justice. Before that, I was a trial court judge, and I did election law, mental health law, property tax law, adoptions, and 10,000 order of protection cases in domestic violence. And it was while I was there that I discovered that senior citizens often needed extra services that were not normally being provided. So I developed a system for providing those extra services for senior citizens who are victims of domestic violence, and I'm very proud of that.
Wow.
So before that, I was the clerk of the court for 12 years. Before that, I was a commissioner at the Metropolitan Water Reclamation District for 4 years. So, I've practiced law in this community and my own practice and with different government agencies since 1976, and I have enjoyed every minute of it.
Very cool. We would also like to point out that this terrific experience, no question. I also want to point out that you had a very famous father who was very, very popular in the Jewish community.
Oh, yes.
And that was Congressman and Alderman Roman Pucinski.
He was committed to the security of Israel. He was the only Gentile on the board of Israel Bonds, and when he resigned from the board, I was lucky enough to be placed on the board.
Cool.
And I loved every moment of it. It was a wonderful experience, and working with people who were dedicated and committed to raising money for the safety and security of Israel, but more than that, who understood that the security of Israel is part of the security of the Middle East, and that having a strong Israel is an important part of what not only Israel has to worry about, but what America has to worry about. And I've told you before, my father, I can still hear my father saying, Israel is not a sentimental journey for the Jews. It's something for all of us to be worried about. And I agree with that.
That's very cool. There's no question he was 100% pro-Israel all the way, and
yes.
he was very much loved and appreciated in the Jewish community.
Thank you for that.
Thank you. And, as long as we're on the subject of Israel and Jewish, you were pointing out your pin to me?
Yes, I got this when I was in Israel. My daughter and I went to Israel in 2000 as not as guests of Israel Bonds, but with an Israel Bond tour, which was fabulous because they knew everything that we had to do to, cut through red tape, which I could never have figured out by myself. And we went to places that were just amazing. I mean, besides the Wailing Wall, we went to Masada, and we went to places that were so interesting, not only in terms of Jewish history, but also Christian history. And I just valued that experience so much. But the people were so welcoming and so productive. You'd be driving along a street in Israel, and everybody was rushing to work or rushing to school, big buildings, lots of agriculture, terrific technology, and just a wonderful country.
No, you're definitely right. Technologically, I mean, most of the major tech companies have large developments in Israel, be it Microsoft or Apple or, excuse me, whoever else.
Sure, and for good reason, because the technology, the brain power is there, the will to work is there, and the productivity is there. So, I mean, it's a wonderful place. It's almost like an experience for anybody who wants to start thinking about building a company to go there and say, well, how am I going to start from scratch? Well, you know what, Israel did it. So this is a really good model.
Yeah, and will to work is such an important thing. It's like, my mother always used to say, where there's a will, there's a way.
Yes, yes. And I think that the work ethic is so high in Israel, but also in Chicago's Jewish community. I mean, when you look at Jewish immigrants who came to Chicago, often with nothing, like so many other immigrants.
Yeah, my father had the equivalent of 20, whatever the money was in Lithuania in his pocket.
Right. My grandma came here. She was 14. She had, I think, 27 cents by the time she got to Chicago. But you look at that immigrant experience and you say, these were people who were genuine, who came here looking for opportunity and then worked hard to achieve their goals. And God bless.
No, absolutely. I definitely agree. But you know what? We should talk about the Supreme Court.
Yes. Okay.
So tell us a little bit about the Supreme. What kind of cases does the Supreme Court handle?
The Supreme Court handles the cases that come up from appeal at the appellate courts, but not all of them. The Supreme Court decides which cases it will take. The appellate court takes every case that gets appealed. The Supreme Court gets to decide which ones, and generally they will take cases where the laws are ambiguous or there's an allegation that the law is unconstitutional, or where the issue is just so important and will come up so often that somebody better figure out what's the right way to do this, or where there's a disagreement between different appellate court districts and the Supreme Court wants them all to get on the same page. So it's a very interesting kind of caseload, very interesting cases, very interesting colleagues to work with. And of course, it also has an administrative responsibility besides the research, writing, and decision making that you would expect from a court of last resort in a state like Illinois, which is a very large state. There is also administrative responsibility directly and through about 16 committees dealing with technology, budget, resource allocation, and other issues that I'm very interested in, having been the clerk of the court for 12 years and being very comfortable and very familiar with that experience.
Yeah, and one thing people don't realize also that when a judge needs to be appointed,
right,
it's also the Supreme Court that
does that.
Yeah.
And I have to tell you, I think that that's a tremendous responsibility. And I've said that I would work with the smaller bar associations, the ones that don't usually get any attention, to try and identify experienced, responsible, credible, talented attorneys in the communities to judgeships. But I do have one thing that I'm very specific about. The judges who have been appointed to date, many of them were appointed and now we're being told they have to run for election. And the Supreme Court in the middle of all of this has said, oh, but if you lose that election, you're not going to get to come back. And I think that that's a sort of sneak play rule that I don't think is right. I think that if you gave up your law practice, you were selected by a justice to be on the court, you went through the screening process, if you're doing a good job, you show up for work every day. If you're 45, 50, 55 years old, you can't go back and start a practice again. You just can't do it. So those judges that took the job under the old rules, I think, should be able to stay. And then from a date certain, the new rules should start.
I'm very much with you on that because, having interviewing all these different judges,
Right.
some of them are in positions where if they don't win the election.
I know.
And you're right, they've given up their practices.
Right.
They're at an age where they might not be able to find anything else.
Right.
It's horrific.
It's not fair. And I don't like mystery rules. I like rules that say, here's what we're going to do from this day forward. And if you want the job of a judge, here's what's going to happen. And if you run for election and you lose, this is the risk that you take. Decide whether you want it or not. But decide it in an informed decision, not the old way where you took this job and expected under the old rules to be able to keep it if you did a good job, if you showed up for work and you were responsible. And then, well, rules changed. I don't like that.
No, fairness is very important, no question about it. I assume you have a website?
I do, www.pucinski.org. And remember, there's no H in Pucinski, Pucinski.
www.pucinski.org.
Yes.
And, check it out. Find
Yes.
all about Judge Aurelia Pucinski, an appellate court judge running
Right.
for the Supreme Court. We want to thank you very much for being here. We
thank
want to
you so
thank you
much
so
for
much
having me.
First of all, it's always a pleasure, and you should know of all the judicial candidates, she's as charming as anybody.
Thank you.
Always terrific to me.
I love being here. Thank you.
I want to thank my entire technical crew, Sonny Hirsch, and, not just technical crew, he's the producer of the show.
Thank you, Sonny.
So thank you for joining us on the Sonny Hirsch Election Special. And look forward to seeing you. We'll have a number of different shows, and we hope you catch them all. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you.